We're going to start our tour with the lower level of the town hall. Most of you probably have never been down here, but there's actually some very interesting points of history as far as the construction and some of the features of the town hall that are in the basement. So we'll proceed into the lower level. Right, the town hall was originally built in 1888. We found that the town was growing a lot in the 19th century, mid-19th century, with the manufacturing going on. Originally, all the town meetings were held in the church, which at that time was originally located on the town common. And as the town grew, we needed more space, so we erected the town hall in 1888. The first $1,000 was actually donated by the Allen family, for which Allen Hall was named on the second floor of the town hall. Then I believe the second amount of money was like $1,900 the town came up with, and that was the construction cost of the town hall. When it was originally constructed, 1888, there was no indoor toilet facilities. We had an outdoor outhouse somewhere on the property. About 15 years after the town hall was erected, they decided to put in indoor facilities, which at the time would have been an outhouse. We have the original men's facilities located right through here in the basement. Several years ago, we knew it was here, we never really looked into it, but when they were going over the exterior of the town hall to renovate it, possibly vinyl side it, redo the exterior, there was talk of maybe removing this. We looked into it and discovered it was pretty much all original. So without having to restore very much, we brought it back to the way it originally looked. And it's a three-seater located right in here, and pretty primitive. The women's...
Call them three-holers.
Yes. The women's facility was located on the second floor. Four-seater. I said three, didn't I?
No privacy.
No privacy.
What do you want to be saying?
Anyone's got to go, hurry up. Four at a time.
I'll just mention a few other points while we're going through. The original women's facility was located right above it. Now it's storage for the town hall, so we actually had separate women's and men's facilities. 1936 is when we got indoor plumbing where the current bathrooms are, so that's when we brought the running water in, and these were no longer in use at that point.
That's nice.
The lock-up room was constructed, as you can see, a few years after the town hall was built in 1888. A lot of people think it was actually a jail cell for criminals. What it was used for were homeless people and tramps, really, that were coming through Paxton. There was a concern because people back then would tend to just sneak into farmers' barns and spend the night, and there were concerns of maybe the barns burning down if they lit a fire, things like that. So they would round up these people, and this is where they would keep them kind of overnight. The wood used to construct this actually came from down at Moore State Park from the sawmill in 1891. Again, during some of the reconstruction, this was possibly going to be torn down, but we pretty much brought it back to the way it would have been. If you want to take a peek as we go through, you're welcome to do that. We have the original door on there, which we repainted, and the inside was all refurbished. So it's got pretty much the only things that really had it was a bucket and the metal cot, which is in there now, and that was from town inventories.
What happened to the bureau that was in there?
The bureau, I don't know.
When I saw it, there was a bureau in there.
Actually, when we started restoring it, it was full of all sorts of things.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, it was kind of a storage room, but pretty much anything in there, nothing was really original, too. There was,
No, that wouldn't have been original. Oh, no, they wouldn't have. But I was surprised to see it.
Yeah, they had an auction, I think. That's when they started cleaning things out, and that's when we cleaned it out and did it over at that point. Okay, we're going to head outside now, and we're going to go back up the sidewalk to the front door, and I can point out some of the exterior features and things as we do that, and then we'll go in through the main doors. Well, Town Hall is an interesting architecture. It doesn't really fall under any particular sort of architectural style, but it goes back to 1888. One of the nice things here is it's mostly original. We've, as you know, the last few years gone through some renovations and things. The windows we had put in are pretty sympathetic to the original ones, so they're in the original placement and things like that. See, we have the scalloped clapboards up there, and actually the windows on the third floor, if no one's noticed, they're actually outlined with stained glass. So those are original up on the third floor. Over the years we've had shutters on it, and those have been taken off, and window boxes. We were able to actually redo it in clapboards, which is nice, instead of vinyl siding it, which was one of the alternatives we looked into. So we can start on the inside. We'll go in the main doors. Okay, why don't we head right upstairs. This hall, Allen Hall, which was, as I mentioned before, named for the original benefactor, donated the $1,000 for the construction, is what the hall was named for. A few of the points I'll just mention up here. There originally was a stage up here which was taken out about 1962. At that point there was need for more town offices, so they took the stage out, and that's when we put in the offices that are here today. Some of the nice original features, though, we have the hardwood floors, and up there, if you can see on the way out even, the stained glass windows I mentioned from outside, which are actually up in the loft in that area. One of the nice things I'd like to bring to everybody's attention is this podium. This was found in the basement of the town hall. We brought it to Sturbridge Village, and one of the curators dates it back to approximately mid-19th century, so it predates the town hall. We just had it recently restored by Chris Stone from town. He's done a lot of the finish work on it. And we have it back in the town hall. So we rescued it from the basement. It's a hardwood ceiling. They use these. I mean, they probably came in around the Victorian time, and you'll see them right up, you know, even through the early, maybe 1920s, 1930s. But it is all hardwood, varnished hardwood. You see, I'm not sure up here, but we probably originally had, instead of having the fluorescent lights, you probably had more of a chandelier coming down the middle, where this pediment is up here. The town, of course, back in 1888, really, the town hall was used for almost all town functions outside of the church, you know, was separate. So really, it was probably built as really an all-purpose building. For a while, the library was actually in here before they constructed the one on Richards Avenue. So it was a library in here. We had the town hall. We had it for meetings. During some of the school expansions and things like that, they actually had schooling in here. I understand also, before the construction of the Catholic Church, they actually had the Catholic services held in here as well. So was it up in here? Yeah, so it was up in this hall. We had a lot of spaghetti suppers and things I've read about in the past. They used to have dances up here too. The town would hold dances up in this hall, and so unfortunately, though, you know, as the town grew, the needs grew for bigger space, and now the town meetings are usually held down at the school, which has a bigger facility. You know, now we have our selectmen meetings down on the first floor in the selectman's office and stuff like that. But it's actually a great hall, so for smaller meetings, it would actually be a good place to have them still. So, well, we can head downstairs, back down to the first floor. I'm just going to be very brief down here and point out a few things. As I mentioned, the toilet facilities which were moved are now located over in this area behind this wall. If anybody that hasn't been into the town hall, those were put in when the town water came in 1936 in the center. You can see it's actually the town hall. A lot of the towns you've been in the different town halls, they've been really taken apart over the years and changed. We do have a lot of the nice features. We have the old beadboard in the walls and some of the old doors and things, so it has a lot of the character, the hardwood floors. As I mentioned, too, the selectmen meetings are actually held on the first floor, and tonight we have one of our selectmen with us, Mr. John Lucy. So I was going to see if he maybe wanted to mention a few
Sure.
points about the town meetings.
Just for anybody's information, all selectmen's meetings are open to the public. Anytime any of you want to come, you're more than welcome. Basically, the type of government that town of Paxton has is what they consider the purest form of democracy there is, which is everybody in this town has a right to make a vote. And all the decisions that are made for this town are made stemming from a town meeting, which everybody can participate in, and everybody has one vote. Whatever the majority decides, that's what happens. What the select board does is then they carry out the wishes of what has come out of the town meeting, and we will also, as new items come, we may propose issues at the town meeting, but that's basically what the function of the select board is, to carry them out and to research other potential ideas.
Okay. All right. We're going to head over to the town common now, where Ed's going to meet us, and he's going to give us a few points of interest about the town common. So we can head over that way.
The town common. Paxton didn't have to live up to the regulations that Rutland and Leicester did. In forming the towns, they had to set aside a certain tract of land called common land for the church, the school, and possibly the parsonage. But Paxton didn't have to do that, so after they were named and after it was approved, they wanted to build a church. That was the main purpose why they split from these two towns, to form their own, to build their own church. But the big problem was, where are we going to build it? Well, there was a little discussion. They formed a committee, and then finally they reached this location here. It was a tract of land, 1.5 acres, bought from Mr. Snow. The land, the road wasn't there, the church wasn't there, and well, Richards Ave was probably a rough dirt road. On the first, the first church was built facing West Street. We're not quite sure whether it is or not, but it was either facing West Street or facing down Pleasant Street, one or the other. And in 1853, they moved the church from there over to its present location. And keep in mind that that church at that particular time was only one story. It didn't have the steeple, the belfry, or the two extensions that's on there now. The Civil War monument was in memory of 21 of citizens of the town of Paxton who died during the Civil War. The monument was erected about 1871. The cannon that you see around there were 424 howitzers that came in about 1891. The Ledyard Bill, who was a secretary of, a senator, a representative in Boston, was able to get 4 cannon. Originally there was a railing around there. If you see some pictures of it, there was a railing around there, but the railing became dilapidated and it was removed and the hedges were put in. The World War I monument, which is no longer set about where the end of the the sidewalk is there. There was a watering trough down at the corner of Richards Ave and Pleasant Street. At first it was a wooden one. Then the state, they must have broke their heart, gave the town a granite one. Water was supplied to the watering trough from up on Lawrence Street. It came down, and then eventually that water that came down on that line served down the school and also the town hall until they got the regular water in here. The two new monuments, the Vietnam and Chief Martell's monument is there, and let's see, there was a Liberty pole about where that light is about. It was about there, and we stayed there probably 50 or 60 years. The Liberty Pole in most instances was erected either in the center or very close to the center of the town. The pole was a symbolic of the liberty during the colonial days. The organization Sons of Liberty was formed about 1765 to work towards liberty, and they would take their pledge in front of the Liberty Pole. The Liberty Pole was also a focus for contention between British soldiers and the Liberty Boys. During the Revolutionary War, a flag was flown from the Liberty Pole denoting some of the episodes of what they felt was strives for liberty. One being probably the Boston Tea Party, and the other being the repeal of the Stamp Act. After the Revolutionary War, the Liberty Pole more or less became a flagpole. The Liberty Pole in Paxton was erected about 1866. I think that it denotes liberty of the Negro because it was the end of the Civil War. And that was on the Common until about 1919 when it was replaced by a wooden flagpole. Prior to that, they used it for the strive of liberty itself, whereas Paxton used it to denote the success of liberty. And back here is the flagpole. It's 100-foot, one of probably the tallest flagpoles in the area, and possibly one of the tallest flagpoles in New England. We haven't had that confirmed, but and they're talking about the flagpole from the ground up, not from on top of a building. When the church was first built here, there was a bridle path that came down, that went down by the church, because there were horse sheds along the side later on. And then eventually they put in that street there. And the church, the land changed back and forth from the church, from ownership of the town to the church, then back again. Finally, with the two extensions, the church is sitting on the original track of the Common. Now, we have down at the Historical Society quite a bit of, well, we had to do a survey of the Common a few years ago because they were going to give us a grant to do some work up here. So there's quite a lot of history on that. On the Civil War Memorial, and also there's a World War I Memorial over there, which is still part of the Common. All the names have been verified and their records of service are on file down in the Historical Commission. So if anybody wants any information on any of the individuals whose names appear on those two monuments, you can let us know. And also Ralph Berg, we have his record too. So if there's any questions before we leave for the cemetery, so that we'll get a little dark.
Why did they move the church?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. Probably they thought it was in the wrong position or something. The World War II monument is the one that, did they mention it in the town hall?
No.
Well, it was, during the war, it was sitting, well, I guess it was sitting about, probably in front of the flagpole in that area there. Or it might have been over here a little bit. But the monument now is a plaque listing all the fellas' names, and it's upstairs in the town hall. It's going to be mounted in another area, and we're not quite sure where. We thought we had the area where it was, but now it seems though it's a little bit too big for that area, so we've got to give it a little more thought. I don't know whether there'll be someday a granite monument out here on the Common or not. We'll go over to the cemetery. Another one of the aims for the early settlers was to have a cemetery near their church. Possibly that might be another reason why the church was moved over here, because this is the location of the cemetery and the church is over on the other side. We look around, we see a stone wall. I forgot to tell you that common land was actually common land. It was set aside so that the people in town could have their cattle, swine, horses graze on the land without any trouble. If the horse or the animal got away, then it was up to the owner, or else it was thrown in the pound and he had to pay to get it out. But there was a lot of trouble. They had a lot of arguments about that because they tried to put a fence around the common. But you notice the stone wall here. In your older cemeteries, small family cemeteries or even your town cemeteries, you'll see a stone wall for two reasons. One, to mark the borders of the cemetery. The second was to keep the animals out. And one of the problems, probably, I wasn't on a farm, but a cow, especially a cow, when it needs to scratch its head, it'll go and scratch its head on a corner. Well, what was happening is they were coming to scratching their heads on stones like this. So you figure 300 or 400 pounds scratching the head was pushing the stones away, pushing them down. So that was one reason why the stone wall was formed. This cemetery was formed. The first burial was 1769. The second burial was the minister. And if you turn around, the big stone that's in the corner is the grave of the first minister, Reverend Bigelow. The stone itself was carved by the only local 18th century carver. It was William Young from Worcester, and he, with his different symbols that he used, but on this particular one, it was the latter part of symbolism on the stones, and it shows the minister, shows Reverend Bigelow standing in the back of his pulpit, one hand with the Bible, and the other is, I think he's pointing, and it shows the two strings from the pulpit itself, and also he's in this garb. Another characteristic of stone carving, if you notice, this isn't as old here as what you would find in Boston or say down the Cape, because symbolism started around 1700, and it was based on Puritan religion. By the time this church started, Puritan religion was on the decline. So the symbols that you see here have nothing to do as far as Puritanism goes. But here, just take one. If you look here, well, it's kind of hard with the dark, but there's a willow and urn here. The willow denotes, and this was in 1815, was accepted as a standard symbol. The willow notes the weeping of the people who were left behind by the deceased. The urn is the remains of the person who is represented on this stone. And of course, cremation was popular, then it went down, but as you look back, this urn, we studied this and we found that it goes back to the Iron Age, where even all through their early periods, the bodies were cremated, and some of these graves that were dug up, they found an urn. The earliest symbol of the surety of death would be the winged soul effigy showing the skull and crossbone. But here in Paxton, we only have the skull. Two examples of the skull and the surety of death. A little later, they had the surety of death, the urn, the casket, and the frame of the hourglass. And that is one of the few, or these three are one of the few symbols that we have of that particular surety, and whereas most of ours are the willow and urn. The Puritans believed in the soul's rise to heaven, and they denoted that on practically all their symbols up through that period, at least before the Revolutionary War, because after the Revolutionary War, you had the separation of church and state, and Puritanism went down. One other characteristic, on this stone here, there were two styles. This one here is square, and that you can denote that as being in the 19th century. The death occurred in the 19th century. Not all the time, because some of these stones were probably made beforehand by a carver, and if it happened a little bit later, he'd use that stone. But if you look on, well, look on this stone here. It's rounded. That denotes 17th and 18th century styles. The slate, before the slate, they used fieldstone. Fieldstone was very hard to carve because you have to consider that all this carving was done by hand. It wasn't done by machine. And then they found slate around 1650 down around Boston, and they found that was a little easier to carve. So slate became popular. Some of this, now this particular slate here came out of the slate, probably one of these slate quarries in Sterling, because it's a green stone. Where the gray stone came from, oh, it's hard to say, except the Wingham Young stone, most of his material came from Worcester, up on top of, well, Belmont Street, up in that area. There was a lot of slate up in there, and it was very poor. It was schist. It scales over, it cracks very easily, and as you notice there, even on that stone, some of these other stones here that he did, it's beautiful work he did. He didn't smooth, and also it's starting to shale off and your stone is going. But look at this one here. It's just as solid as the day is long. An early carver by the name of Samuel Kilburn used this green material for making his gravestones. And Paxton has about 10 examples of his work. And he used as a symbol the willow and urn. About 1850, white marble was discovered up in Vermont, New Hampshire. And that was a lot easier to carve. So you see, you can set the periods here. You go from the slate into the white marble, then you get into the marbles a little bit further, probably 3 periods of where your material is changed. On your symbols, the symbols changed about every 25 years, and if you follow it, if you take and follow it, and 9 times out of 10 you can see, no, well, give or take 2 or 3 or 4 years. And also remember that, as I say, sometimes the carver would make these stones and he'd save them until somebody needed them. And there again, too, it all depends on the individual. Some of these stones, he might have had an itinerant carver coming through town. Hey, I'll put you up for all winter if you carve my headstone. He's probably gone out and he got a stone, a field stone, or probably a slate stone that he wants for a headstone, and he would do it. Well, probably the carver would say, well, these are the symbols we're going to use. Or probably the individual would say, well, this is a symbol I want, which possibly might be behind the period that the carving is being done. But remember, it's all deep hand carved. Some is beautiful. And we have here, we know, probably 4 or 5 examples of carvers. Young, we got John Parks, we got the Sewell, let's see, it was Harriet Merrifield Forbes done a tremendous study of gravestones. And by looking at some of the symbols on some of these stones, you can tell who carved them. Sometimes you can't. The carvers very, very seldom sign their name, but there is one in here, well, it's right down the back there, by Jonathan Parks, and he signed it, but that's very, very seldom that you do find that. Here we have, for notables outside the minster, a memorial stone for Willard Moore, who was killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill. He's not buried here, but it's a memorial stone. Oh, another white one in back here, Amasa Earl, who was killed up in the War of 1812 up in New York State, and he was so badly wounded on a retreat that they couldn't move him, So they left him there, covered him up so the Indians wouldn't find his body, and today nobody knows where he's buried. Down over the hill, there's a grave marked with another white stone, but it is a grave of one of the Negroes who served during the Revolutionary War from Rutland. We had 3 Negroes who served during the Revolutionary War. They're freemen. He was a free man. He had a farm down off South Street. And he and his wife are buried down there. And for years, he had an unmarked grave until we got this information from a fellow out in, I think it was out in the university, was doing a study on the Negroes in the Revolutionary War. And he wrote to us and he told us we had these 3. And so we looked into it, and sure enough, and when we found the grave, we were able to find the grave. It was pinpointed in Roxa Howard Bush book, and we got the stone from the government. There's another one down in the back of the early Indian Wars. This was after the Revolutionary War. He died out in, I think it was Lake Michigan. We do have veterans of the Civil War, other veterans of the Revolutionary War, the Spanish-American War, the Philippine Insurrection, World War I, World War II. We don't have any, and of course the cemetery has been closed for years. The only ones that are be buried here now are families that have the burial rights. We do have a survey of the cemetery. There's, roughly speaking, let's see, there's 4 doctors. One doctor was instrumental in anesthesia out in Cleveland, Dr. Howe. Then we have 2 ministers outside of Reverend Bigelow who only served about 2 years, and he died. And then we had a Reverend Goss who served, I think, something like 30 years, and he's buried right down the back. We have our first representative in the state government, Abraham Smith. He's right down in the back there. We have many of the, I would say 90% of the mill owners that's on Moore State Park buried here. The original cemetery was not much bigger than what you see in the back here. The section that runs from there all the way back, which we call the new section, was bought, and oh, I don't know, it was probably in the middle 1830s, 1840. It was the person that owned the land. He is buried over the hill, over the knoll there. With the one Indian we believe is buried there. We haven't been able to prove it, but his name was Oakham. He lived in town. He was the only Indian that we know of that lived in town. This is after the settlement of the town itself, and he got accidentally killed by a fall one night on an icy road, and we believe he's buried here. But of course the records are very sparse. And sometimes these graves were marked, and probably the stone was broke, probably deteriorated, and it was never replaced. Other ones, probably the graves were never marked. And of course, as you notice, today you have one monument, list all the names, and it's in probably a 6 grave lot, 8 grave lot, or something like that. These here are all individuals. They had a headstone and a footstone. This is called the headstone, and about 6 foot in back would be the footstone. And this would be, well, I'm just guessing. This would be probably the mother or the father. The father would probably be, as you're facing, would be on the right. The mother would be in the middle, and probably a child or 2. But each one would be a single grave, and that's hard to tell because I presume that right in through here that it's all single graves. The records, as I say, there are 2, I think there's either 2 or 3 deaths prior to both the burial of the minister and the woman that died just before him. But are they buried here? We don't know. It's hard to say. You assume it because the record is in the town and there isn't any other cemetery around here. Anything prior to that. We do have one grave field stone that's right over in the back. There's a field stone. Let's see, where is it? Oh, there it is. This is the only field stone that's in the cemetery. And if the sun is shining just right, you can just make out some of the inscription, but it's very hard. And the same way here, you can't read these in the morning, but when the sun is shining right, especially overhead, you'll be surprised how you can read them. Sometimes you have to wait if you want the inscription without rubbing it. You have to wait until noontime to read it. Or you can chalk it, where you can chalk it. Oh, the other thing is, yes, there's a tomb down by the gate. There's a tomb for the cemetery. And of course that is another, what you might say, a service that isn't done today, because there are very, very few burials carried over from, say, wintertime to spring. But years ago, when they had to do it by hand, and you had frozen ground, they would put the body in the tomb until spring, and then they, in fact, the 3 graves that we identified that's up in Moreland Cemetery of 3, well, not well, I wouldn't say they were indulgents, they were laborers in town. He died in the wintertime, and that was the key. When we found that out, that he was put in the tomb, and that's the last one I would say. That was back in the 1930s. We can go back down to the White Building.
I come out and do regional workshops as much as possible from Boston. Everyone seems to like that quite a bit. Instead of having to go into any conferences or workshops or any kind of thing to get into Boston, I know it's tough. So definitely everybody likes it when we come out here to Boston, so that's why I'm here. But also I'm here for myself too, because I find that as much as I might be able to teach a little bit while I'm here, I always learn things when I come out to the communities as well. And I think by coming to as many communities as I have, it's made a difference in being able to do my job, because a lot of what my job is telling one community what some other community has already done before them. And with 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. Somebody's always pretty much done it ahead of you. So that's my job. Historical commissions in Massachusetts, there's almost every city and town in Massachusetts has a historical commission. And a historical commission plays an important role in preservation planning in their community. Basically doing things like compiling information about their community, what's still present from their past in their community, and what's significant to their community, what kinds of things are eligible for the National Register. So they're an advisory board. They're an advisory board usually to the Board of Selectmen, so that if there are decision-making things going on in the town, the Historical Commission is there to advise the Board of Selectmen on issues of historic preservation. So like I said, almost every city and town in Massachusetts has a historical commission. Who here lives in an old house that might be eligible for the National Register? Okay. All right, let's take your house, for instance. Let's say, hypothetically now, that Jason's house is on the National Register of Historic Places. And let's say that Jason decided that this old house just isn't suiting my tastes anymore. I'm going to tear it down. I'm going to build something else instead. His house is listed on the National Register. Can he go ahead and tear his house down?
No way.
Who says no? In fact, if his house is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and he has decided as a property owner that he wants to tear that down, and he's going to use all his own money to do that, and there's no other local bylaw to the contrary, you can go ahead and tear it down.
I can make it into split level.
The National Register is primarily an honorary designation. Okay? A lot of people get scared off by that concept. Well, we don't want the National Register. We don't want any National Register designation. It's really an honorary designation. The only real regulations that go along with being listed on the National Register would be, let's take another hypothetical situation with Jason's house, and let's say that the Massachusetts Highway Department, is your house on a
Right on 122.
right on 122, perfect example then. Let's say that the Mass Highway Department has decided that that road's going to be widened to, I don't know, 5-6 lanes or something. How's that?
Pretty much take it over.
Okay, that covers that one. Okay. Okay, so we'll go to 6 lanes on that highway so we can get that traffic moving through a little better. And, well, we're going to have to take Jason's house down to do that. We've taken it by eminent domain already, so you don't have much of a say here. We've already taken your historic house on the National Register. Now, can the Mass Highway Department just go ahead and demolish that building? No, they can't. No, they can't. They can't because the regulations that govern National Register properties involve federal and state involvement on a project. So if, for instance, in a case like that with a transportation project, there's going to be either state funds, state highway funds, or federal highway funds that's going to be used on the construction of that roadway. And because that's going to have an impact on a historic resource, then it has to go through a review process through our office at the Mass Historical Commission. Okay, so that's the review that takes place. And it's really the only regulation that goes along with the National Register. It's not just federal funds or state funds, it's actually any kind of involvement in a project. For instance, the telecommunications towers that are going up all over the place, when you construct one of those, you need an FCC permit to do that. That's a federal license. Again, that trips our review on any kind of a tower like that. We've been talking to the Old Sturbridge Village about whether they would be interested in being on the National Register. And they say, well, why would we want to be listed on the National Register? And the reason we can say that you might want to be listed on the National Register is because if you're trying to recreate an 1830s village, and someone from that 1830s village can see a cell tower off in the distance, that's going to impact their perception of that experience. Whereas if it's listed on the National Register, that trips our review, and we'd be looking at other alternatives for that cell tower construction so that it's not visible from a National Register property. Local bylaws. Let's again take Jason's house, and let's say that the town of Paxton has what's called a demolition delay bylaw. About I think it's about 80 communities in Massachusetts that now have a demolition delay bylaw in place. So again, Jason's house, he goes into his building inspector's office and says, I want to get a permit to demolish my house. There's no demolition permit needed. All the building inspector is going to do, here, fill out this application. He signs off on it as soon as the gas is shut off, the electricity, all those basic kinds of things, safety issues, and the demolition can take place after that. With a demolition delay bylaw, for the way that these local bylaws work, and these are local bylaws passed at town meeting, he can't simply go in and get his demolition permit if it's a house that's been determined historically significant. It's first going to go through a determination of your local historical commission, and your local historical commission is going to determine whether it should be preferably preserved. And after that, a 6-month demolition delay period would take place. Like any kind of local bylaw, you have a lot of freedom to write your own bylaws that's going to be passed by your town meeting. So when I look through the demolition delay bylaws across the state, and I've read 50, 60, more than I care to admit, they're all different. I mean, if anyone's familiar with writing local bylaws and getting things passed at town meeting, it tends to be you look at other towns, and again, not wanting to reinvent the wheel, you look at some other towns that have written their own demolition delay bylaw, and you write your own based on that. So that's what towns have done. So you'll see similarities. You'll see language that's similar, but they're all different. Basically, we use the idea of significance and integrity. One, so it's got to be significant to the history of the United States, but it's at the local level as well. So it could be nationally significant, but you can be on the National Register if you're locally significant, if that makes sense. It doesn't have to be the George Washington slept here at all. In fact, those are not the things that are really all that important in the nation's history. It's where the early settlers of Paxton lived, and the important industries of Paxton, the stores and the farms and those kinds of things that were out here that are really important to your community and collectively are important to the nation's history. So it's looking at the things that are significant to your town, and it's also looking at the things that have integrity. So we were just out in front of the Paxton Town Hall, and Jason mentioned there was talk of covering the town hall with vinyl siding. As it stands right now, the town hall, because it's been in municipal use for over 100 years, I don't know if you've ever had us do a determination of eligibility on the National Register, for the National Register on the town hall, but I would think it would be found eligible for the National Register. If it was covered with vinyl siding, would it be eligible for the National Register? No. Almost never are things that are covered with plastic are going to be eligible for the National Register. Would the church? The church would likely be as well. Yep. Yeah, even with the addition off the back. I mean, there's compromises made all over the place, of course. Really, what we look for are districts. I mean, there are things that are individually eligible for the National Register, but really we like to see a district, a collection of historic resources, all in one place, because that's really, it's more the sum is greater than the parts. Who here has ever heard of a historic district which governs what color you can paint your house? How many people are scared of something like that? Yeah. The kinds of historic districts which govern such things as paint color, but I'll go on to that in a second, are called local historic districts. Those are not the National Register. Completely different than the National Register. National Register is honorary, and National Register is designated by the federal government through the National Park Service. Honorary. There's no regulations unless that federal or state involvement is there. Local historic district, on the other hand, is created by town meeting voters, and those are the kinds of historic districts where exterior changes to property are regulated by a local historic district commission appointed by your Board of Selectmen. Okay? Now, in terms of that paint color review, right now in Massachusetts there are over 200 local historic districts in over 100 communities. Some communities have a lot more than one, so that's why you get the 100 cities and towns have them, but over 200 of them in Massachusetts. I just did a review on this and found that just about all of them don't actually review paint color. And one of the biggest concerns about creating local historic districts is, I don't know if it's ever come up in Paxton or some of the other towns around here, is that I want to be able to paint my house whatever color I want. I hear that wherever I go, and the reality is that for the most part these local historic districts don't govern paint color. That's exempt. You can paint your house whatever color you want. You do go to find some places around the state, like Hingham, certainly Beacon Hill, is going to have paint color review, and there's going to be a few others around as well. One of the ones that I'm surprised about is Royalston. You know where Royalston is? Royalston has paint color review in their local historic district, but they're one of the rare examples. So for the most part, these local historic districts actually are really just trying to protect the historic resources there. Paint color is reversible, so it's not the historic resource that's being protected so much. It's trying to protect the historic buildings and other structures there. How many people here would like to see the White School building preserved? Okay. Do I dare ask how many people went to school here? All right. When it comes to saving a building like the White School building, there's no easy answer, and yet there's so many options at the same time. One of the first steps to think about is what's the best option for the school, and should all the uses that are right here right now remain? Are there some other uses that could come in here? What's the future expectation of municipal property needs? There's all kinds of things to look at. It's hard for me to give a simple answer on what the best option is for here. It's really it's a decision that the town of Paxton has to come up with. Basically, the grants that we give through our office are the restoration grants are called the Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund, and over the past few years, that's been like $26 million. It's actually not right now. It's not funded through the state legislature for the next round, but there's bills right now to refund it, and there's two possibilities of how it might get funded. Something you might want to talk to your state reps about is to make sure that the Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund gets refunded again for this coming year. So $26 million over the past few years has gone to this, has been funded through this program, and that's been available to cities and towns and nonprofit organizations. So that's how the church could get a grant, because they're a nonprofit organization, for instance, in Worcester. Or a historical society that owned a museum or something like that could get a grant for their building. Or a city or town could get a grant for their municipally owned property, like the White School building. But the other thing is, to get that grant, you're going to have to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places, because we don't give these grants out to just any building. You've got to be on the National Register first. To really figure out what's most significant to the town of Paxton, I think what you'd want to do is have a look at the broad view of Paxton. Kind of look at all the historic resources in Paxton, and then know from that big list, kind of figure out what's most significant to the town of Paxton. Sort of the things that are up at the top. And that's essentially what we require from our office, is that you do what's called an inventory of your historic resources. And that's basically compiling information on inventory forms approved by our office of historical research and like how buildings were used in the past, who lived there, all kinds of architectural information about the styles of the building, things like that. Putting that kind of information onto these inventory forms, and then putting it all together. And right before your eyes, you see like your whole history of all these historic resources, mostly buildings in a case like Paxton. And from that, it's very clear which of the buildings that are going to rise to the top. And those are the ones that you'd be most apt to head for the National Register with. So without having that inventory, sort of that broad picture of historic resources in your town, we don't really encourage communities to pursue National Register. There are exceptions to that in a case like the White School building, where I don't know how this school building compares to other historic buildings in Paxton, but that would be something that you'd want to look at. That's when you start saying, okay, how do we go about a National Register nomination? And basically that works by submitting information to our office on what you would like to have on the National Register. We do a quick eligibility opinion on whether we think it's eligible for the National Register. And if we think it is, then there's a nomination that's completed. And that nomination is very time-consuming. This is not just like a 2-page application. The National Register nominations are very complex because it's taken very seriously. I mean, there's only so many things that get listed on the National Register, so it's taken very seriously. Lots of times, the historical commissions won't actually do the National Register nominations themselves. In a lot of cases, you'll get a separate grant from our office, a matching grant, and you'll hire a consultant, and the consultant will do the National Register nomination themselves, and because they do them all the time, they can do them very quickly, and it just goes a lot smoother that way. So yeah, that might be something you want to pursue as well. That's a different kind of grant through our office called a survey and planning grant. Those grants are usually about $10,000 to $15,000, and it's a matching grant. We pay 60%, and the town pays 40%. It's a good deal. For private developers, there's a financial interest as well. Obviously, a private developer isn't going to get a grant from our office because that's only available for nonprofit organizations in cities and towns. But a private developer would also be interested in the National Register because they would then be eligible for federal tax incentives. Yeah. Yep.
I just wanted to thank Chris Skelly for coming out tonight from Boston. And also Scott Wilson and Debbie Magnuson from the Paxton Cable Commission.